CCA Louisiana's Habitat program began in the year 2000, with our first project completed in 2002. Since then, we've completed 30 projects, 30 different locations, and 35 individual reefs. In addition, we've done 7 floating island marsh restoration projects during this period of time. So we've been very active on the coast of Louisiana, bringing back habitat. Artificial reefs are intended to replace natural habitat. In Louisiana, we're losing our natural oyster-rich shell reefs due to erosion and subsidence. We're also losing our hard structure due to the oil production platforms being removed at an increasing rate. So we replaced this hard structure with limestone, concrete, and other hard substances to make an attachment point for the marine organisms to begin the food chain. Tonight we're in Scott, Louisiana with the Cart family to dedicate our reef that was constructed at Vermilion Block 69 this fall. The reef is dedicated to Mr. Jack Cart in his honor by his family. And this reef is in about 25 feet of water, 10 miles off of the coast, replacing a platform that had been removed a couple of years ago. So this is bringing back habitat that was lost due to structure remover for the local fishermen to get back to the spots that they like to fish.
You can see behind me we've got some great photographs and some signage for the ZT Jack Cart Reef that we're here to dedicate tonight. We're here in Scott, Louisiana. Plenty of the Cart family is here with us, and several members of our local CCA chapters dedicating this great project to Mr. ZT Jack Cart. Beautiful story about how his family came together, put the dollars together to sponsor the building of this reef, and their honor and the patriarch of the family, Mr. Cart, through this reef that we built in Vermilion Block 69. Yeah, it's a big job. It takes a lot of coordination, a lot of planning. It takes, in a case like this, it takes a couple of years to put it all together. You got to choose the site where you're going to go build a reef like this, get all the permits, go through all the red tape that it takes. Obviously, you have to have the dollars that it takes to build a project like this. Tremendous amount of planning and strategic work to make sure you build it the right way. And then you actually have to go out and build it. And you see the type of material and equipment that it takes to do a project like this. So really an incredible effort by our volunteers here at CCA, our Reef Louisiana program, the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, the Cart family, several other sponsors, the Building Conservation Trust through CCA, all came together to build this brand new reef habitat in Vermilion Block 69, in a place, by the way, where oil and gas platforms used to stand. It's one of the biggest challenges we face in Louisiana is the loss of habitat. And when these oil and gas platforms come down, that is lost fisheries habitat. So through our Reef Louisiana program and through great donors like the Cart family, we're able to go replace that habitat with the materials you see behind me in a reef like the one we're dedicating tonight.
My father was Jack Cart, and he was a great dad. He spent a lot of time with us, growing up. He was an athlete, an engineer, a naval officer in World War II, and owned several businesses throughout his life, but he always found time to take us fishing, and we spent a lot of time running out of Southwest Pass and fishing out of Joseph Harbor and Pecan Island in the Gulf, and he just loved to fish, and he taught us all how to fish and spent a ton of time with us doing it.
My father was Jack Cart, nicknamed after Zachary Taylor Cart, he was named after Zachary Taylor because our great-grandfather fought with Richard Taylor in the Battle of Mansfield. Daddy was a wonderful dad. He took us everywhere. He wouldn't go anywhere without us. I took a boat home one day that was a 20-foot fiberglass boat after I'd gotten out on my own. And when I pulled it in the backyard to show it to him, he said, "Andrew, if I'd had a boat like that, I'd ended up in Cuba." He was that kind of adventurer. He was special. He wouldn't go anywhere without us.
My father was a hell of a guy. He never went anywhere without me. I was like a little puppy dog behind him. We'd go hunting in the woods, and he'd have to come back and get me out of the briars and stuff when we were woodcock hunting. And we go fishing. We go fishing by ourselves in the Gulf of Mexico in an old wooden boat with a 40 horse on it, and bring a kicker by ourselves and come back. We'd put in an intercoastal city and go out of Southwest Pass, go all the way to what they call the Mulberry rigs, when there was only 3 rigs out there. And we'd fish those rigs and come all the way back to Intercoastal City before there was a freshwater landing, a freshwater bayou landing and all that, you know.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and good evening to this great crowd we've got here tonight with us in Scott, Louisiana. Really excited to be here dedicating tonight the ZT Jack Cart Artificial Reef. It's a special night for us at CCA. I know it's a special night for the Cart family. We're going to talk all about how this project came about and what it means to several of us in the room. I am David Cresson. I'm the Executive Director of CCA here in Louisiana. I've got several of our volunteers and board members with us that I'd like to introduce. We've got Mr. John Walther, who is our immediate past president and the vice president of our Habitat program. We've got Mr. Mark Mouton, who is from our Lafayette chapter, is our incoming state president. We've got Mr. Gunnar Waldman here, who is the president of our local chapter here in the Scott, Crowley area, called our Cajun chapter. We've got several other members of our Cajun chapter here with us tonight. I want to thank all of our CCA volunteers for being here tonight. We've got Stuart Bio, who is a state and national board member of CCA, and I don't mean to leave anybody out. We're really excited. This is a big night for CCA, and we really appreciate the Cart family for allowing us to be part of it. So let me tell you a little bit about this, and then I'm going to hand it over to John, who'll tell you about sort of the particulars of the project. CCA, for those of you that are familiar, has been around almost 40 years in Louisiana. We are the voice of recreational anglers. We are the voice of the marine resources here in Louisiana. 35, 40 years ago, when redfish were in trouble in Louisiana, CCA stepped up, was formed by some of the very people you see in this room, and got rid of things like gill nets and made redfish a game fish, to where now redfish are abundant once again. When red snapper was an issue 10 years ago here in Louisiana, CCA stepped up, and now you can enjoy your red snapper season all year long. Today we're fighting for things like good management of the menhaden industry and the pogie boats. I'm not going to get into that tonight. I could talk for hours about it, but we are here whenever our coast is in trouble. CCA is here to step up and try to make sure that is no longer the case. Keep this in mind. There are folks out there that will take the last fish out of the water if we let them. CCA is here to make sure that never happens, so that these beautiful kids here have the same resource to enjoy that we all have with our dads and our grandpas, just like the Cart family did. So this project here tonight is a 20-year project in the making for CCA. 2 decades ago now, CCA really got into the reef building world. And we've built, I don't know, 35 or 40 reefs at this point. And about 5 years ago, we started building reefs in places where oil and gas platforms once stood. If you fish in Louisiana, you understand that one of the challenges we face is the removal of oil and gas structures from the Gulf of Mexico. There used to be 3,500, now there's about 1,100, and every time one of those comes out, that is lost fisheries habitat at a time where, let's face it, Louisiana cannot afford to lose any habitat of any sort. So people like Stuart and Mark and John and Gunnar and others got together 5 or 6 years ago and said, we got to do something about this. We got to start building habitat in these places where these oil and gas platforms are being removed. And tonight's project is one of many that we've already done, and one of many more that we will do. I don't remember the year, Gunnar, you might. In somewhere around 2016 or 17, a group of us sat in a room at Don's Seafood in Lafayette and dreamt up this idea of building reefs where oil and gas platforms once stood. Now it is a prolific program with 900 sites approved and ready to go. All we need is people like the Cart family to step up and help make those projects happen. So we'll talk some more. We're going to do the formal dedication after everybody's done speaking. I'd like to introduce you to Mr. John Walther, who is, like I said, our VP of Habitat for CCA and really was the coordinator of this entire project. How about a nice round for John?
Occasions like tonight remind me how blessed we are to live in a sportsman's paradise here in Louisiana. We're also blessed to have great family and friends like the Carts supporting us as we work on Sportsman's Paradise. Over 20 years ago, we started the Habitat program in CCA Louisiana. Now it's one of our 4 founding pillars of what we do. So over those last 20 years, we've created 30 individual projects with 35 individual reefs. And we're going to continue this well into the future. But today we're here to dedicate this reef that was created at Vermilion Block 69 in October in honor of Mr. Jack Cart. This reef is located approximately 10 miles off of the coast south of Intercoastal City. It was once a very prolific speckled trout destination for our anglers, but it's not there. So we're replacing these sites one at a time with hard bottom habitat. At this particular site, we placed 80 pieces of structural concrete that were culvert boxes, manhole covers, junctions, things that are donated and left over for construction. And we're repurposing these kind of hard surface concrete products into fisheries habitat. So we placed 80 of these structures on 20 distinct sites in 3 parallel rows to take advantage of the current to create a new fisheries habitat. We expect this habitat is probably already producing fish. Almost immediately after we deploy these things, just the new bottom structure, the change in the current starts attracting bait fish, and the bait fish start occupying it. But within a year, the marine organisms start attaching to this hard surface and create a complete ecosystem, a complete marine life cycle, just as the legs of the platforms did previously. So that's what we've done here, and we're so grateful to the Cart family for being with us on this project as we're here to dedicate this tonight to Mr. Jack Cart.
John Walther, ladies and gentlemen. So, a little bit of a funny story about this project before we get to the family. If you can see the pictures behind the family over here, I mean, if y'all can give us a little room so we can see them. The one right back here has got a funny story behind it, especially if you connect it to the 2 over here. You notice that the forklift in this picture is different than the forklift in these pictures. That is because when we started building the Cart Reef, that forklift went overboard and ended up on the bottom of the ocean. Yes, so we asked if it could stay down there as part of the reef, but we actually removed it, and but it was no longer functional, so they had to go with the green forklift. So anyway, nobody was hurt, which is the most important thing, and the forklift is no longer on the bottom of the ocean. But actually, if you look closely at the picture of the boat captain went and built sort of a barrier back here on the back end of the boat to where no more forklifts can go flying off the back. It's an interesting story. So anyway, this is really about the Cart family. This was something, Steve called me, I guess, gosh, Steve, it must be more than 2 years ago now. We came over, had lunch, and he told me about this idea he wanted to implement for his dad. And I got to learn a little bit about Mr. Jack, and I'd like for you to hear a little bit more about Mr. Jack and how this all came about. I'm going to pass this over to Steve and let him tell us a little bit about it. Steve Cart.
No, this is a phenomenal deal to improve the habitat and replace some of the habitat that we once had. So we're just, want to thank God for giving us the ability to be able to do this, and all my family for showing up. And Dad, he pretty much spent his whole life bringing us fishing, teaching us how to fish, and he was a great father. He was an athlete. He was a military guy, a naval officer, an engineer. He had a lot of things, but most of the time he spent with us. And I think that's pretty invaluable. We spent a lot of time in the Gulf of Mexico fishing around platforms and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, I'm just proud that we're, as my family, able to contribute a little bit to this project, and hopefully down the road we can contribute some more. And I would hope that other people in Louisiana would all step up and try to help along with this, because I think this is something that the grandkids and the kids, the future generations, will be able to enjoy. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. While we're at it, Steve, I also want to thank your friends J&J Exterminating and Cullen Investment Group that made gifts to help us build the project tonight. We've got some of the other brothers here with us, and first on my list is Andrew. Andrew, you got a few words for us?
Maybe so. Well, first of all, Steve suggested that this is important for the next generation. There was no one, in my experience, that was better than Daddy at exposing us to what was out there. I mean, he would do stuff that was unbelievable. He would take us, spend the night on Shell Reef, wouldn't go dove hunting if we couldn't go. I mean, it was just always family. And that's what South Louisiana was about. I hate to do this. I sank a couple boats with him.
And without him.
And without him. Mike had a whole collection of old rods and reels, and Dad and I went fishing behind Umbrella Point one day and came across.
Which isn't there anymore, by the way.
Right, because of erosion. Yeah, so I sank a 14-foot flat with all Mike's rods and reels while Mike was in the Navy and Daddy was in the boat. But we got home. I saved the fish. We had a bunch of big old bass. He was a good daddy. He wouldn't go, he'd get a call on Saturday afternoon, "You want to come dove hunting?" He said, "Well, can I bring my boys?" "Well, we don't really want the boys there." "Well, can't make it, sorry. See you another time." I mean, he was a good daddy. And a hell of a fisherman, by the way.
Did you cook some teal in the boat, though?
Yeah. He was a very safety-conscious guy. Mike and I, he applied for one of the first teal hunting permits in the early 60s, special teal season. And he got Mike, me, and himself a teal permit. Mike and I walked out in the marsh, killed 3 teal, came back. He lit a fire in the bottom of a wooden boat with about 40 gallons of fuel in the bilge and everywhere else. And we gutted the teal, cleaned them, gutted them. Mike and I caught catfish and handed them to him. He'd skin them, fried them, hand them back to us. We'd keep fishing. And then he cooked the 3 teal in a little pot with the open flame in the wooden boat with 40 gallons of fuel in it.
And his children.
And his kids. But I think mostly he was taking us away to get Mama a break. But she put up with him, and so did we. We enjoyed the world of it. He was a special guy. Thank you.
Andrew, I'm glad there's nobody from Wildlife and Fisheries here after hearing some of those stories. I think the statute of limitations might have kicked in by now, though. Mike, a few words?
Maybe so. Andrew and Steve said most of what had to be said, but I can remember as a little bitty kid, smaller than this one, tagging along behind him in the woods, and he'd have to get me untangled from the briars. We were woodcock hunting. And
When they had woodcock.
yeah, when they had woodcock. And then we'd get in a little wooden boat that my Uncle Allen built, and we'd put in at the Corncob Bridge south of Gaydon and go all the way around Umbrella Point fishing. Now, Umbrella Point is no longer there. Neither is Short Point. And we're losing marsh left and right, and it seems like nobody cares. And I'd like to see something done about that one of these days. But anyway, he used to tell stories about, I spent the night here in a wooden boat with a tarp over me, hunting ringneck geese, which are no longer here in any quantity. The instances are just too numerous to talk about. It's unfathomable, some of the things that he did. He told a story one time about going down to White Lake to meet his friend Gumbo Guidry, who was a trapper on Long Point. And on the way there, the flywheel of his motor came off and landed in his lap. He said, I carried enough spare parts to overhaul my motor, got it going again, and when I pulled up to the camp, Guidry came out and said, man, God damn, Jack, what happened to your pant? He had a hole in the crotch of his head where the flywheel spun. The next day he got up and went hunting, and he came back with a squirrel. And he told Gumbo Guidry, he said, Gumbo, he said, I walked all the way to Pine Island. He said, man, there ain't no way, Jack. He said, look. He showed him a big old fox squirrel that he had killed. So it's some good stories. Nice to relive.
Thank you. And I've been threatened with physical harm if I try to hand the microphone to Katherine, but his daughter Katherine is here with us as well. So thank you for being here, Katherine.
Deceased sisters.
And two deceased.
Eloise and Tinker.
Suzanne.
Okay, Eloise and Suzanne. So it's wonderful to hear the stories. Feel like we know a lot more about Mr. Cart now at this point, and we are so honored and pleased to dedicate this reef in his honor. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and formally dedicate this. I'm going to grab this from behind you. Steve and Andrew and Mike and Katherine, if y'all don't mind, just come stand right here and kind of get everybody squeezed in for this a little bit. So this plaque will go to Steve or whoever you decide should get it. But in addition to the dedication through this certificate, it's important that you know that on NOAA charts and on maps from now on, when you go to that section, you will see Jack Cart Reef. If you go to look at those maps. Yeah, oh, yeah. So this is not just naming this in honor. This is an actual name of this reef from now on, and it'll be dedicated that way on charts and maps and everything else. So, yeah, there you go. Thank you. So I'm going to get y'all to hold this, if you would, and I'm going to read it. So what this says is that on behalf of the Coastal Conservation Association of Louisiana, our board of directors, and thousands of CCA members across Louisiana, we dedicate the ZT Jack Cart Artificial Reef in Vermilion Block 69 in honor of a local conservationist and naval officer, ZT Jack Cart, for his lifetime of service to Louisiana. He was a local businessman, a devoted husband and father, a distinguished World War II veteran, a football hero, and a lifelong outdoorsman and conservation. Dedicated on the 17th day of February in the year 2022. Ladies and gentlemen, the Jack Cart.
I'm kind of humbled by the fact that we're able to kind of support his legacy of conservation. You know, he was a fly fisherman and he hunted with a 410, and he was always about conservation, even before conservation was cool. You know, he was very unassuming, never seeking any kind of accolades for anything he ever did, but he's part of the old great generation, I think, and I think he'd like a reef because it's underwater and nobody will ever see it.
Very proud, very proud. He was an accomplished man, didn't have a lot, but he raised a good family, was married to his wife and true to her throughout their years. And I would say I've modeled my life after him.
My thoughts tonight are, this is great. This is a great occasion. I'm glad we had an opportunity to honor him.
Well, I grew up as a young boy from New Iberia, raised fishing out of Sycamore Point, Louisiana, Vermilion Bay. I turned to offshore fishing at an early age, and we used to be able to go 15 miles offshore and catch red snapper and catch the species that we wanted to catch, like cobia, red snapper, jack crevalle, cobia. Now there's, with the oil and gas industry taking out all the platforms that are non-productive, we, CCA, along with Wildlife and Fisheries, has come up with this Reef program along with selected partners, and we're putting reefs back in the water. It could be old platforms, it could be materials of opportunity.
How have the reefs helped the fishing?
Well, we put a reef in 3 years ago. That was the first initial reef, called it was called a reef in Vermilion 119 and 124. And 3 months later, we were catching 25-pound red snapper once we put those platforms back in the water.
This is the future of what we do in CCA. It's a wonderful legacy. You look at what the Cart family's done to continue the legacy that their father built with them. The three boys were telling stories early on about the time they spent in the Gulf of Mexico. And this is just a great, the reefs are a great way to honor their father in a way that will pay benefits for fishermen for many, many, many years to come.
I've been fishing probably since I was about 5 years old. The older I got, the more I fished. It's a very fun thing to do with friends and family. It's fun to be out on the water. It's fun to catch fish, and been fishing in the Vermilion Bay area, all over the Gulf of Mexico and other parts of the world my whole life.
This is so exciting to have the Cart family here tonight with us to celebrate Mr. Jack Cart with a dedication to this reef and to support our program. It's very important that everybody gets involved in the coastal issues in Louisiana, because we're losing our habitat very quickly, and we need a lot of help to bring it back and help us with these projects.
CCA is a grassroots organization. We've got 24,000 members in 30 some odd chapters across the state of Louisiana who are our members, and they direct our policy, they direct the projects that we build, like this one here tonight, and we truly are the voice of the recreational angler, the voice of the resource, and it's all built and driven through our membership. So I would advise anyone seeing this video, if you care about our coast, you care about our coastal resources, you should be involved with CCA because you'll have a voice when it comes to the management and well-being of our coastal resources.
Well, clearly it's one of the most, as a fisherman or as someone who is involved in outdoor recreation in Louisiana, it's paramount to protect our coastline, to protect the value of the fisheries is important. We all have kids and grandchildren. We want to leave something behind for them to enjoy the same things that we were able to enjoy along with our parents and grandparents. Critical to join. If you're a sportsman or a fisherman, you need to join CCA.
How can people get more information?
Yeah, it's real simple. CCALouisiana.com. You go right to the homepage. There's ways for you to join CCA. It's only $35 to be a member of CCA, and your dollars go directly towards projects like this one here tonight, but also our advocacy work at the coast, making sure that our resources are well taken care of.